Are you curious about the Well-Trained Mind language arts curriculum? Maybe you're looking for a writing curriculum in specific? If so, check this out. If you're new here, I'm Rian, a Christ-following wife and a homeschool mom to 3 boys. Here we talk all things homeschool, and we will learn together how to use our roles as wife, mom, teacher, and homemaker in order to glorify God. I've been using the Well-Trained Mind language arts for 4 years now, ever since my oldest son was in 1st grade. Their philosophy is to become a good writer, you copy the works of those who are good writers. So obviously this doesn't mean like plagiarize them, but it means get yourself familiar with a good literature where writing is done well. And you do that by copying sentences, by having someone dictate those sentences to you and you write them as you get a little bit older. And then you read the literature and narrate back to someone what was said. And then you start forming your own thoughts by taking those narrations and putting them to paper. So I really like this method. It makes a lot of sense to me and it really simplifies the writing process. Now I will say that you are going to want to use grammar also. This is not a grammar and writing curriculum all in one. This is writing in specific. There are a few grammar elements throughout, especially in those younger grades. They'll talk about why do we capitalize certain letters and things like that. However, this is best paired with first language lessons of the Well-Trained Mind, which I'll be doing a review on that in a couple weeks. Or if not that grammar program, then maybe a different one. But this does not have a ton of grammar in it. And each year has about the same setup. Now it gets harder as you get older, obviously, but it's very much the same. It's a 4-day-a-week program, and each day focuses on one thing, whether that be copy work in the younger grades or dictation in the older grades, where your parent will read aloud to you a passage of a book or a short story or something, and you will have to write that out. And then there are days where you will read a passage, or in the younger grades have a passage read to you, and you will have to do comprehension questions, or you'll have to do just a flat out narration of, a retelling of what you heard. And then in those 3rd, 4th grade levels especially, you will take your narration and not just tell it to the parent, but you will put it into words yourself. And so that's kind of the steps of the writing process. So I believe there are 2 ways you can get this book, and I have only done one way, but I'm pretty sure you can get the instructor guides separately and then come up with your own narration and dictation, or you can get them all together. I always get them all together. I think it's much easier that way. And so I get one book, and it has the first section of the pages are all of the instruction, and then the second half are all of the student pages. Now how we do this is they actually have, for your copy work and your dictation, they actually have line pages in the back that you can use. But because I want to be able to reuse my books, I don't write on those. I give my kids a language arts notebook, and that's where all of that will go into. But also in the student pages are the passages that they're going to read in order to answer those comprehension questions and give you their narration. So I'm going to turn this camera around and we're going to take a look inside what the actual curriculum looks like. Okay, so I picked a week about halfway through the school year, week 18. You're always going to start off day 1 with narration and original sentence exercise. So your student would start off reading this passage. Then you would ask them in 4 sentences what happened when the doctor and his apprentice arrived at the farmhouse. Here's some examples of what they might say that would be an acceptable answer. And then down here, if they're having problems getting a good answer for you, here are some questions that can just help get them thinking. And then as they narrate to you, you would write it down here. Again, I just do this in a notebook. And then you would have them repeat the first 2 sentences of the narration. Help them if they need to, but if not, just try to have them recall it from memory and write it down themselves. Then day 2, we would move on to dictation. You would dictate this passage aloud to them. This tells a little bit about the passage and also a little bit about the grammar and the vocabulary that's in that passage. You usually will dictate it 3 times and have them write it themselves. Again, there's space back here for them to do the narration and the dictation, but you can also just do it in a notebook or on a piece of paper. And then we would do the same process on day 3 with the narration. And they'll be reading a passage from typically the same book, but just a different passage. then they'll give you a narration. Again, you have those helper questions if they need them. And then day 4, we're back to dictation, and that is the end of the week. Then you'll see level 1 looks very similar, but slightly different. So here is day 1, and it is copy work instead of dictation. And so you can just talk to them about where it comes from. This specific one comes from Winnie the Pooh. Talk a little bit about the grammar within the sentence. Okay, so here is where they would actually do the copy work if you want them to write in the book. Like I said, I do it in a spiral notebook. But if they are a new writer and lose stamina quickly, you can do the shorter sentence. If they're doing really well with their writing, you might want to try the longer sentence. And then day 2 for this level is the narration exercise. You read them aloud, this short passage. Then you have a set of questions that you would ask them and they would answer. And then at the very end, you just say, what is one thing you remember about this passage? And then as they watch, you would write that down. Again, you could do it back here if you wanted to, or just on a notebook or your separate piece of paper. And then day 3, we would be back to copy work, talking about the grammar. They would copy it. In day 4, there is our last passage for the week with questions. Ask them what they remember. And then about mid-year, they actually have you start, you write what they remember and then they copy it. So you're kind of combining narration and copy work. So far, everything about writing with ease has worked really well. So my oldest son has a May birthday. And so when he was in 1st grade, I started him in level 1, 2nd grade level 2, 3rd grade level 3, 4th grade level 4. Now I will say level 4 has been kind of a challenge for him. And I don't think it got necessarily so much harder than level 3, but I think that he's just not naturally a very good writer. He has other amazing strong points, but writing is just not one of them. And so I do think that next year, we're going to try something else. But it actually works out because if you look at the schedule that they tell you to follow for writing with ease, they tell you if you start this in 1st grade, then by 4th grade, you need to just practice. Or they give you other curriculums that you might be able to use instead for that gap year. Then in level 6, you move on to something else, writing with skill or something like that. But this year's kind of a built-in gap year where you would just practice what you've learned. And I think we're going to take this year and try something different, which I'll talk about in a future video. Now, my younger son, he is in 2nd grade, but is technically young enough to be in 1st grade. He has an August birthday, so it's kind of a weird spot to be in. But in everything else, we went ahead and started him on his 2nd grade work. But I decided not to put him in Writing with Ease 1 his 1st grade year because he was on that younger side and I was seeing how it progressed and how my older son was kind of starting to struggle a little bit as he got older. And so I held off and gave my 2nd grader level 1 this year. And they actually say that that's something that you can do. So he still has, there's a path for kids who follow starting level 1 in 2nd grade. There's a different path for them to follow. But all in all, we really like the program. My 2nd grader will be using it again next year. Like I said, my 4th grader will be taking that gap year and we'll try something else, but we will probably come back to this in 6th grade. So let me know down below, what do you use for writing and what do you think of it? And subscribe if you haven't already, that really helps me out. And be on the lookout for Tuesday's video, which is the Homeschool Show and Tell collaboration for the month of March. And we're going to be sharing our favorite books. Thank you so much for watching and I'll talk to you next time.